greet you all. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum min al-children al-amul aghani ini with al-choir, Sunday choir, le katiba banadi nag. لنسوان في نيروبي وفي كينيا التعبوا زمن ده كله ورا عشان يشوف العيال. ولكم كل الرفقاء في السلاح وفي النضال. In compliance with the course of our struggle, as you can see, I'm constrained to talk from here. I shall not have a microphone, otherwise I would have preferred to stand there. So, lakin jahazu zada. In compliance with the course of our struggle for dignity, for freedom, democracy, and good governance, our struggle for justice and equality for all Sudanese, irrespective of their tribe, ethnic group, race, region, religion, or gender. It is my obligation and duty to be here before you to enlighten you on our long search for a just peace in the Sudan. This is the first briefing that I am making since we signed the last three protocols in Naivasha 4 days ago on 26th May 2004. Maybe because of your proximity to Naivasha. But we will be making these briefings all over and across the new Sudan. Fellow citizens, before I deliver this important briefing, I would like to begin by paying tribute and saluting the memory and honor of all our heroes and martyrs. who have fallen in the struggle for Sudanese dignity before and after independence, and throughout our history, and now in the struggle for the new Sudan. A new Sudan of democracy, freedom, justice, human rights, and prosperity for all Sudanese. I salute these heroes and martyrs as a reminder that they did not die in vain. The legacy and spirit of their struggle will always guide us and all generations to come toward a better and ever better Sudan. Whether the referendum on self-determination will be, whatever it will be at the end of the 6-year interim period, it will always be a greater and better Sudan. Without the ultimate sacrifice that these comrades and heroes and martyrs have made, we would not have this briefing today. I therefore ask you to stand and observe a minute of silence in memory and honor of our martyrs and heroes. Please be seated. Thank you. I will divide my presentation into 3 parts. First part will deal with the problem statement and objectives and vision of the SPLM. This will essentially be a revisit and a restatement of the problem of the Sudan and how from 1983, 21 years ago, the SPLM set about to solve that problem. That is, a revisit to the objectives, vision, and strategies of the SPLM. Part 2 will be a briefing on the peace agreement. This will cover a briefing on the 3 protocols signed on 26th May 2004, which the chairman of the Kenyan chapter, SPLM Kenyan chapter, alluded to before. I'll also touch briefly on the previous protocols which we had signed for completeness and context of this peace agreement. Part 3 will be summary remarks and the future, which the chairman of the chapter also talked about. It will cover the way forward in the post-agreement situation and the prospects. My presentation will end with that part, with part 3, but if we have time, and if either you or I are not tired, then I will welcome some questions or comments from you. So I'll begin with part 1, as the problem statement and objectives and vision of the SPLM. It is appropriate and necessary to begin this briefing by revisiting the problem that we have been struggling to solve over the last 21 years and the objectives and vision of the SPLM. This is necessary so as to make the briefing meaningful and to put it in its proper context. So what is the problem of Sudan? All problem solving must start with a correct understanding and definition of the problem. In social science, this is called problem delimitation. تعرف الdimensions بتاع المشكلة. It is a very crucial phase because misdefinition or incorrect definition based on wrong understanding of the problem will surely lead to wrong prescription or solution, and therefore wrong methods, wrong strategies, and wrong tactics, and therefore ultimate defeat and disappointment. Like a medical doctor, the problem solver must have a correct diagnosis before attempting a solution. There are many examples that one can cite in this respect. For example, in Anyanya 1, and I was a member of that movement. It is because of this lack of critical analysis and definition of the problem that led to our failure of that movement. We must learn from this and similar mistakes. So what is the problem of the Sudan? As you all know, Sudan has been at war within itself for the last 38 years of its 48 years of independence. One can even say that there has been war throughout the 48 years of independence, because there was a Nyanya 2 during the entire period of the Addis Ababa Agreement from 1972 to 1983, when the SPLA was formed. Why? What is the problem? Why should a community subject itself to generations of war and suffering? In my view, the attempt by various Khartoum-based regimes since independence to build a monolithic Arab Islamic state to the exclusion of other parameters of the Sudanese diversity constitutes the fundamental problem of the Sudan and defines the Sudanese conflict. The Arab Islamic state in the Sudan results in the exclusion of the majority of the Sudanese people from governance, and therefore their marginalization in the political, economic, and social fields. There is war in the Sudan simply because the majority of the Sudanese people are not stakeholders in governance. The Arab Islamic State ends up being imposed by force rather than by consent of the governed through a consensual social contract. Those who qualify as both Muslim and Arabs in the Sudan are a very small minority. Yet for the last 48 years of Sudan's formal independence, they have insisted to define the Sudan in their own image, to the exclusion of others. This is the problem. We must therefore start the problem solving with a critical examination of the Sudanese reality and a correct definition of the Sudan, so that we evolve an all-inclusive form of governance that includes all Sudanese. In order to do this, it is necessary to go down the corridors of history to show that we, the Sudanese, are indeed a historical people, and that the new Sudan has an anchor in history. An anchor in history. This is very important. If we cannot find an anchor in history, if we cannot anchor ourselves in history, then the struggle at the end of the day is meaningless. I will present this anchor in terms of the present character of the Sudan and as it connects with our historical roots. The Sudan is characterized by two forms of diversity, what I have called contemporary and historical diversity, that go back thousands of years, indeed to the dawn of man. In terms of the historical diversity of the Sudan, we did not pop up from nowhere. We just did not appear yesterday. We have all been here, all along. And the proof is that we are here today at the Kenyatta Conference Center. I divide the Sudanese historical diversity into 11 periods. There is Sudan before the biblical times. And many of you who read the Bible can quote many verses in the Bible that talk about the Sudan. Indeed, right from the very beginning in Genesis chapter 2, you find the Sudan. You find the Sudan as part of the Garden of Eden. I'm not making this up, by the way. Please give me scriptures. You can have your. I'm not making it up. You can read Genesis chapter 2, verse 8, and you will find that the Garden of Eden was watered by 4 rivers: the Euphrates, the Tigris, We know where those are. They are in Babylonia. But nobody talks about the other two rivers. The Pishon and the Gihon. Thanks for the Ethiopians, they have named a Gihon hotel. If you go to Addis Ababa, you will find that there is a hotel called Gihon. This is the Blue Nile. And then the White Nile is the Pishon. The Garden of Eden was not some small garden, a backyard garden. It is the area between the Tigris and the Euphrates to the east, and the White Nile and the Blue Nile to the west. And so you are part of the biblical lands. You are part of the Garden of Eden. You are part of God's creation. You can go and check it later on in the Bible, and you will find that I'm telling you the truth. Actually, when I was in Rumbek, during Christmas of 1999, I went to a church called Alol, and I told them that actually here, right at this very spot, this is where God created the world, the universe. And they were kind of surprised. They say, how did that happen? I say, well, if we have now located the Garden of Eden, it is the area between the Euphrates and Tigris to the east, and the Blue Nile and White Nile to the west. And then it says in Genesis chapter 2 that God created a garden to the east. It means God was to the west. And you see Rumbek is to the west, just to the west. And so indeed, this is where creation took place. These are our roots. Then you come down the corridors of history. You go to the ancient kingdoms of Wawat, the kingdom of Irtat, the kingdom of Madja, and the kingdom of Anu. You will find this in the General History of Africa, Volume 2, by UNESCO. So also I'm not making it up. You can go and check. The kingdom of Wawat is interesting. It is the area south of Khartoum all the way up to Malakal and Wau. Some historians think that the present name of Wau comes from Wawat. And actually there are many Waus. There is Wau Shuluk. There is Wau Nuer near Ayod. And there is Wanachol in Bahr al-Ghazal. That's from the kingdom of Wawat. Before the present era, before Christ, a prince of Wawat went to visit the Pharaoh of Egypt, and he took with him presents. And among those presents was a pygmy from the Congo area. And that pygmy danced to entertain people in Egypt at that time. This is how far back we go. The kingdom of Irtat is believed to be connected with the Shuluk. Because one of the references is that up to this day the Nuer called the Shuluk Tat. And Irtat comes from Irtat. Otherwise the Shuluk themselves call themselves Sholo. This Shuluk is contrived. The kingdom of Anu is believed to be connected with Anuak. And actually the ancient Egyptians had a god called Anu. This Anu got sacrifices because he controlled the waters of the Nile. So the ancient Egyptians made sacrifices so that God Anu gives them more water. We have no problem. We will continue to give more water. And I have been told that the king of Ajak is here with us in this hall. Coming down the corridors of history, you come to Christian Nubia, where you have Merowe, and historians know that it is Merowe that bequeathed the iron civilization to Africa. Iron smelting developed from Merowe down the Nile and to the rest of Africa. I have also been told by my Christian friends that the first non-Gentile Christian, the first Christians, the apostles and so forth, were Jews. But the first non-Jewish Christian was actually a Sudanese from Merowe. You will find that in the Acts of the Apostles chapter 8. Is referred there as the Ethiopian eunuch. And this has been established. This has been established now to have been a high official in the Ministry of Finance of the Kingdom of Merowe, the Queen of Merowe at that time. The Sudanese in the far north of our country, the Nubians, I have been told, have established a movement called Kush Movement for Democracy and the Constitution. They are retracing their roots. This was between 3000 AD and 1504, 1504, when the last kingdom of Merowe fell. And then, fourthly, we have Arab migrations into the Sudan and the spread of Islam from the 7th century to the present. We have modern Islamic states that sprang up in our country and were very powerful, such as the Funch Kingdom, the Kingdom of Darfur, and this lasted up to 1820. Now you are becoming familiar with our history when I mention 1820, because after 1820 came the Turco-Egyptian Sudan, and many of our pseudo scholars begin the history of the Sudan from 1821, from the Turco-Egyptian occupation. But I beg to differ. We should go back in order to go forward. After the Turco-Egyptian Sudan came the Mahdist state of 1885 to 1898, and then the Anglo-Egyptian condominium from 1998 to 1956. It is becoming more familiar now. And then comes the modern Sudan, or the independent Sudanese state, from 1956 to the present. And then comes what I would call the Islamic state proper, the second Islamic state in the Sudan. The first one was the Mahdist state, and then this is from 1989 to the present. Then number 11 I would put on the list is the post-war Sudan, which we believe shall be the new Sudan from the pre-interim period, Legidam, the Haikun Sudan, Mukhtalifa. So as you can see, we have a long history. Peoples and kingdoms have lived and thrived and disappeared in the geographical area that constitutes the present modern Sudan. Yet the present and previous rulers of Khartoum present a false picture of our country as if the Sudan started with them. Of course, they argue this way so as to stake a claim to the Sudan. And they did do this to the exclusion of others. Our contention in the SPLM-SPLA is that the Sudan belongs to all the peoples of the Sudan that inhabit the country. And its history, its diversity, and its richness is the common heritage of all the Sudanese people. That is historical diversity. You look at the Sudan now, what I have called contemporary diversity is the second form. In the Sudan, we have more than 500 different ethnic groups, speaking more than 130 distinct languages. These ethnic groups fall into two broad categories. What might be called indigenous African Sudanese, although we are all indigenous. They constitute about 70% of the population, according to the census of 1955. And then we have the Arab Sudanese. They constitute about 30 or 31% of the population, as classified according to language. Classification there is not strictly racial, it is according to language. Otherwise, those who are racially Arab cannot exceed a very small percentage of our population. The South constitutes about 30% of the total population, and so you can see that indigenous Africans, or those who speak indigenous African languages rather, are even more in the north than in the south. They constitute about 40% of the population in the north. This is another fact that many people do not know, that there are actually more indigenous Africans in the north than in the south. 40% of the total population as compared to 30%. I'm not saying all this in order to cause confusion or to divide people. I'm only stating facts, because as the Bible says, the truth shall set you free. The other form of diversity in the Sudan, other than ethnic, is religious diversity. The Muslims constitute about 65 to 70% of our total population, while Christians and other followers of traditional African religions constitute the remaining 30 to 35%. And so it is, when you look at the Sudanese reality, it is very dangerous to talk about a Muslim majority, because others can also talk about their own majority. You can talk about an indigenous African majority, and for that matter, the women can say that they are the majority, because indeed the women are the majority in the Sudan. So let me underline this obvious fact, that nobody is anybody's majority. And nobody is anybody's minority. We are all Sudanese. Period. These two diversities, historical and contemporary diversity, constitute the present Sudanese reality. And any form of governance must concretely take them into account. The attempt by various cartoon-based regimes to build a monolithic Arab Islamic state to the exclusion of other parameters of the Sudanese diversity constitutes the fundamental problem of the Sudan and defines the Sudanese conflict. The problem is not that of Southern Sudan, Mashkilat al-Junub, as has been popularized since 1947. It is Sudan that has the problem. And if we have to talk geographical, it is the problem of northern hegemony, Mashkilat al-Junub. I've always said that if somebody comes, you picture this, if somebody comes and sits on you, who is the problem here? I being sat on is the problem, or the person sitting on me is the problem? Obviously it is the person sitting on me that is the problem. And this is what should be solved, not the problem of Southern Sudan. When you talk about that, I can see somebody who is ruling in Khartoum saying that, talking about the problem of Southern Sudan, because indeed Southern Sudan is a problem to him or to her, except no her has ruled in Khartoum. But I cannot see a Southern Sudanese talking about the problem of the South. Is he the problem to himself or to herself? It should be clear to all that what is important, the challenge, the solution to the Sudanese problem, is not these categories of people, Arabs, Africans, Christians, and Muslims. No. The solution to the Sudanese problem is to create a stable Sudanese state with a self-sustaining economy and a stable, inclusive government or governance in which all different ethnic groups, different tribes, different religious groups agree upon that form of governance and are equal stakeholders with equal opportunities. A state in which they are able to coexist with harmony and development. This challenge is equally true of the whole of Sudan as it is of Southern Sudan, because we are going to form a government of Southern Sudan. It must be inclusive of all ethnic groups, of all tribes, of all religious groups, so that they are equal stakeholders with equal opportunities. Otherwise, you will also have a problem of Southern Sudan. You will now really have a problem of Southern Sudan. Not before. It is true of any other country in the world for that matter, where there is diversity. But how do we bring about this solution? This takes me to the objectives of this. The answer to this takes me to the objectives and vision of the SPLM and to the long struggle which we have waged for the last 21 years and which will end in the present peace agreement, of which we signed 3 protocols 4 days ago. Our vision and objectives are contained in Resolution 7.2 of the 1994 National Convention, which states, and I read it as it is written in the National Convention resolutions, Resolution 7.2, objectives of the SPLM. The objectives of the SPLM are resolved as follows. A, the objective of the SPLM is the complete destruction of the oppressive regime of the old Sudan and the building of a free, just, democratic, secular new Sudan. B, the SPLM is committed to fight and achieve the right and exercise of self-determination for the oppressed people of the new Sudan, following the demise of the regime of the old Sudan, or in any peace talks with the government of the day in Khartoum. When I read this, I'm not talking about the destruction of the government in Khartoum. We have just made peace with the government in Khartoum. But it does not change the facts. We are talking about the total transformation of the Sudanese state. For otherwise, if it so remains, then you cannot have peace. And so, that is a direct quotation from our objectives, from the resolutions of the National Convention. They do not change if you read fundamental change into these objectives. It is an important resolution. We must appreciate the full meaning of this objective. In this sense, the peace process and the peace agreement that we are now achieving should not therefore be seen as a finality, but rather as a means of struggle for achieving the objectives as stated in this resolution in the sense of fundamental change in our country. Thirdly and finally in this part, what are our strategies that we have been pursuing, or our methods? Our methods and strategy are as contained in Resolution 7.42 of the 1994 National Convention, and which states, I quote verbatim, Resolution 7.42, methods of achieving objectives of the SPLM. To achieve the objectives of the SPLM, the following methods of struggle shall be used. 1. Popular armed struggle as now being waged by the SPLM. 2. Popular uprising or intifada in convergence with the armed struggle and in conjunction with the other Sudanese opposition forces. 3. Peaceful negotiations with the government of the day in Khartoum under the auspices of regional and international mediation, and that is exactly what we were doing in Naivasha. 4. Diplomatic means with support from and in coordination with international forces struggling for justice, peace, democracy, human rights, and the cause of our common humanity. And E, any other means. And so, as you can see, the political negotiations to achieve a just and peaceful political settlement is consistent with the objectives, with the vision, and with the strategies of the SPLM. It did not happen out of the blue, nor is it based on opportunism, but on principles. In the Sudanese situation, a fair and just political settlement will be the result of all the 4 types of pressures or means of struggle, wasail and nadal. And this can be expressed mathematically. I have expressed it before, that a political settlement is a function of armed struggle, of popular uprising or intifada or popular consciousness, of diplomatic and international pressures, and of political negotiations, and any other means. So, in the Sudanese situation, I believe the decisive factor is the armed struggle for the South and other marginalized areas, as we have been doing in the South, in the Nuba Mountains, and in southern Blue Nile, and in other areas. In the rest of Sudan, specifically in the center, the weapon that has been most used is the intifada. In terms of the overall Sudanese situation, therefore, the decisive factors are the armed struggle and the people. This is the strategy we have been pursuing since 1983. It is scientific, and it is based on our own and on international experience. In talking about self-determination, that is to achieve the right and exercise of the right of self-determination, the key factors to consider are armed struggle must be highly developed, and this is what we have been doing, and anything that retards it must be combated, and we must discourage it. Popular uprising or forces of the intifada must be developed, the international community must be sensitized, and the negotiations with the incumbent regime must emphasize fundamental change, achieving results, the same results through peaceful means, not absorption in the incumbent regime or reconciliation with it. In South Africa, these 4 means of struggle were applied. The final result was through negotiations. And in South Africa, the ANC negotiated with the de Klerk regime not to be absorbed into the apartheid regime, and certainly not to reconcile with apartheid, but to bring about fundamental change through peaceful means. This is the context of the present peace agreement in the Sudanese situation. That is, the aim is to achieve fundamental change, which we have called the New Sudan. And this is within the context of the exercise of the right of self-determination. I would also like to remind you that political negotiation as a method of achieving our objectives is not new in the movement, nor do we use it alone, because it cannot work alone. It works in conjunction with the other pressures, with the other means of struggle, with all other means of struggle. In our search for a just and peaceful resolution of the conflict, the movement has been negotiating with successive regimes in Khartoum. From 1985, we called for a national constitutional conference, as you will remember, to address the ills of our country, but this never came about because of the collapse of the Numeri regime. From 1985 onwards, to summarize very briefly, the most serious attempts at a negotiated political settlement included the Kokadam Declaration of 1986, my 9 hours of meeting with the then Prime Minister Sadiq al-Mahdi in 1986, the Sudanese Peace Initiative, also known as the DUP-SPLM Accord of 1988, the two sets of talks between the military regime of that time and the SPLM in 1989, right up to when the NIF took over power in 1989, the inconclusive initiatives by the United States in 1989 and 1990, also known as the Carter and Cohen initiatives, and then the Abuja peace process, Abuja 1 and Abuja 2, and finally the current efforts by the countries of the IGAD that is started with the adoption of the Declaration of Principles in 1994. As you can see, it has taken us 10 years to reach where we are today. By comparison, the Addis Ababa agreement took only 3 weeks to conclude. This is the background. This is the background of the peace process that has been going on. It is a means of struggle. Negotiations are a means of achieving our objectives, and I have stated these objectives. I wanted to put this background so that you bear it in your minds as I brief you about what we signed on 26th of May, 4 days ago. And maybe you will grill me with questions later on. But it is necessary to put this background in the context of the present briefing and in the context of the negotiation. So I go to my part 2 of the briefing. Please bear with me. That is on the 3 protocols that we just signed. On May 26th, last Wednesday, at midnight, Tagriban, the SPLM and the government of Sudan signed 3 protocols regarding the 3 final outstanding issues. These are on power sharing, on the 2 areas of the Nuba Mountains and southern Blue Nile, and thirdly on Abyei. This is a major achievement in the peace process, and they complete the remaining 3 issues. I encourage you to arrange so that you get copies of these protocols, so that you are adequately informed on the real contents of these agreements, rather than depending on hearsay and rumors. However, for now, I will attempt to make a summary of these agreements and discuss them in the context of the presentation that I have just made. I will also touch on the 3 protocols that we have signed earlier. The first protocol is on power sharing. I have it here. This is the original copy. It is titled Protocol between the Government of Sudan and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement on Power Sharing, Naivasha, Kenya, Wednesday, 26 May 2004. This protocol is 63 pages long, and it is signed by Commander Malik Agar. You will notice that all the 6 protocols have been signed by different people. The Machakos protocol was signed by the Deputy Chairman, Commander Salva Kiir. That was in 2002. The Security Arrangements Agreement of last September 2003 was signed by Commander Pagana Mom. The Wealth Sharing Agreement of last January this year was signed by Commander Nial Deng. And this agreement on power sharing was signed by Commander Malik Agar. The other 2 agreements on the 2 areas, the Nuba Mountains and Southern Blue Nile, was signed by Commander Abdulaziz Adam Al-Helu. And the agreement on Abiy was signed by Commander Deng Alor. And so the SPLM delegation to the IGAD peace talks collectively own these agreements. And أنا وثقت كله ولا أنا كتير ريحة فيهم كله. ده بكون ريحة مش وثاقة. The agreement on power sharing consists of general principles of administration, principles of that's the first part of power sharing. I said before that it has 3 parts. The first part, part 1, is general principles of administration and intergovernmental linkages, and human rights and fundamental freedoms. That is a Bill of Rights. That is part 1 of this power sharing protocol. Part 2 covers institutions at the national level, Hukuma al-Markaziyya, including the national legislature, the national executive, the national capital, the government of national unity, the national civil service, National Security Council and security organs, or National Security Service, the issue of language, what language or languages to be used, foreign policy, the national judiciary, the National Constitutional Court, the National Supreme Court, the constitutional review process, that is the production of the interim national constitution for the interim period, other independent or national institutions to be established in accordance with the peace agreement, such as a National Electoral Commission, the Human Rights Commission, the National Judicial Service Commission, National Civil Service Commission, a Self-Determination Commission, a Physical and Financial Allocations Commission, and many other commissions. This is part 2 of this big document, deals with all this. So I cannot read them to you. That's why I encourage you to get this document so that you see what each of these says. It is important to you, and it is important for all of us. Part 3 of this power sharing agreement covers the government of Southern Sudan, abbreviated as GOSS. In that it has institutions, and also the institutions at the level of the states. It consists of 3 sections. That is the part 3 on the government of Southern Sudan. Part 1 is about the state legislature, the state legislature, or the legislature of Southern Sudan rather, and then the executive of Southern Sudan, the judiciary of Southern Sudan. That judiciary will consist of a Supreme Court, a Court of Appeal, that is the Supreme Court of Southern Sudan, a Court of Appeal, and any other courts as deemed necessary to be established in accordance with the Southern Sudan Constitution and consistent with the interim national constitution. So that is part 3. If you want to go and see what each of these says, you get the document and brief yourself. Part 4 of the power sharing agreement covers institutions at the state level in both North and South. This consists of 3 sections, namely the state legislature, the state executive, and the state judiciary. Finally, part 5 consists of schedules. These are Schedule A. Some people pronounce it as schedule. Some pronounce it as a schedule. Anyway, Schedule A. This covers exclusive powers of the national government. السلطات بتاع الحكومة المركزية شنو؟ Schedule B covers exclusive powers of the government of Southern Sudan. السلطات بتاع الحكومة في الجنوب شنو؟ Schedule C covers powers of states. الولايات في الشمال وفي الجنوب. الولايات عندهم نفس السلطات. Part 4, Schedule D, are concurrent powers. Concurrent powers between South and the central government and the government of Southern Sudan, and also the governments of the states. Schedule E are residual powers. Powers that are not mentioned anywhere. They are mulukef. Schedule F, the last one, is the resolution of conflicts in respect of concurrent powers. If you have concurrent powers, these are concurrent powers. So you have 6 schedules. So these 4 parts plus the schedules constitute this 63 pages power sharing arrangement. This is the summary of the power sharing protocol. I would like to summarize the main points to be that you note. 1, the share of the National Congress Party, the NCP. The National Congress Party is the ruling party in Khartoum. Some people call it the NIF, the National Islamic Front, but they call themselves the National Congress Party. So let us call them by what they call themselves. The National Congress Party. The share of the National Congress Party in the governments of the 14 states in the north will be 70% of power in both the executive and the state legislature. And في 14 ولايات في شمال. Actually في 16, لكن نحن قلنا قبل في agreement on 2 areas, جبال النوبة والنيل الأزرق. So that's why I'm talking about 14 states, because I will come shortly to the agreement about the other 2 states. So we have 14, 16 minus 2, we have 14 states. In those 14 states, actually later on you will realize that they are not 14, they are 13. Because one will be lost in the process. But let us go with 14 for the time being until when I come to 13. For 13 states, for 14 states في شمال, the National Congress Party هيكون عندهم 70% بتاع السلطة in both the executive of the state and in the legislature. The other political forces in the north will have 30%. The 30% it includes the SPLM because نحن برضو في شمال. And so الحزاب في شمال ما فيهم SPLM هيكون عندهم 30% ده. بقسموا كيف 30% بتاع آخرين. 10% will be given to the SPLM. 10% بتاع سلطة في كل ولاية. 20% بودي لآخرين. So in the 14 states in the north, the National Congress Party هيكون عندهم 70%. الحزاب الأخرى 20%. SPLM 10%. نحن ما معنى نحن هنشيل الجنوبين لهناك. ده الشماليين بتاعنا بتاع SPLM. كلام ده واضح how you divide power there? Okay, then let us come to the south. How do you divide power in the south? In the south, the share of the SPLM in the legislature and in the executive will be there for Shumal Inak, it will be 70%, both in the executive and in the legislature. Other southern Sudanese political forces will have 30%, including which party? The National Congress Party. هيكون في 30% ده. بقسموا كيف؟ The National Congress Party in the south will have 10%. The other political forces in the south will have 20%. It is the mirror image of what happened in the northern states. Again, nena ma bijir National Congress Party من الشمال. ده جنوبين في National Congress Party يا بيعمل الكلام ده. They with respect to تقسيم السلطة في الشمال وفي الجنوب. أصلا نمشي للسنتر حكومة المركزية the central government. The share of the south الجنوب before we were talking about National Congress or SPLM and others. Now we are talking about north and south. The share of the south in the national government, that is in both the legislature or executive and other national institutions, shall be 30%, 30%, while the share of the north هيكون 70%. This means that the National Congress Party shall have 70% of 70% of power in the center. نحن قلنا شنو؟ الشمال هيكون عندهم 70% بتاع السلطة في الحكومة المركزية. في 70% بتاع الشمال ده, the National Congress Party will have 70% and other political forces including the SPLM will have 30% في الحكومة المركزية. And so what is 70% of 70%? It is 49% of the total. ده بيكون بتاع National Congress Party at the center. The other political forces will have the remaining 30%. And so the SPLM will have also 70% of 30%, because 30% بتاعنا في الحكومة المركزية will belong to the other political forces in the south, including the National Congress Party. So we will have 70% of 30% at the center is 21%. 30 times 70% is 21%. Plus our 70% of the share of the central government, which we will take from the 30% of the north, which is 7%. That is 10% of 70% is 7%. Plus our 21%, so the SPLM will have 28% in the central government. Other political forces in the north will have 14% in the central government. Other political forces in the south will have 6% in the total in the central government. Kuludel adds up to 100%. You will go and make up this arithmetic by then. But this is how we are going to go to the mechanics of the division of power as we have agreed and as it has been signed. وده حكومة مركزية. أنا كلمت عن الحكومات في 14 ولاية في شمال، الحكومة المركزية في الخرطوم، and حكومة في الجنوب. At the center there will be two chambers of parliament. هيكون في upper house or senate or council of states. We have called it council of states. And there will be a lower house or the National Assembly. This shall be filled according to the rule of 30% for the south and 70% for the north. So الجنوبين في البرلمان في المركز will be 30%. الشمالين will be 70%. That's the formula. And then you go and again use the 70% the National Congress Party, 30% the Akharin. You will work out that arithmetic also to find how many members of parliament each party or each group is going to send to parliament before the elections. The Council of States, the other, this is in the House of Representatives, but in the Council of States, the Council of States will be according to the number of states. There will be 2 senators from each state. نحن قلنا قبل عندنا في السودان 26 ولاية. We have 26 states, but they were reduced to 25 states. So each state with the 2 senators, it means there will be 50 senators. 25 times 2. Which is 50. The South will have 10 times 2. That is 20. 20 or 50 is 40%. So the South will be 40% in the Senate and 30% in the House of Representatives or in the National Assembly. There are requirements as to how you pass bills in this parliament. There are bills that can be passed by a simple majority. There are others that can only be passed by a 2/3 majority. And there are others that can be passed only by a 3/4 majority, 75%. This is in order to safeguard the agreement. They are in the text of the agreement, which I encourage you to read. From what I have said now, you will notice that the number of states in the south will remain as 10. The 10 that the government of Sudan states, the president states, or as may be determined by the legislature of Southern Sudan. Southern Sudan will have a constitution. If it wishes to change the number of states, it will be free to do so. But for now, there will be 10 states with 20 senators based on the rule that I have just said. With respect to powers in the schedules, there are many, and I encourage you to refer to them. You will see which powers belong to the center, which belong to the south, which the South government of Southern Sudan, and which belong to the states. So briefly, this is the power sharing arrangement that we have just signed. The other protocol which we signed is on the 2 areas, the Nuba Mountains and Southern Blue Nile. This protocol on Nuba Mountains and Southern Blue Nile, this one, it has 20 pages. And it is signed by Commander Abdul Aziz Adam Al-Hilu. It begins with a preamble. SPLM holding the office of governor for half of the pre-election period in each of the 2 states. So what are we saying? قبل الانتخابات. This intikhabat will be after 3 years. The period before the elections will be divided in two. If it is 3 years, then it will be 1.5 years, 1.5 years. كل زول بيشيل دور بتوعه يكون governor. So if for example in the Nuba Mountains, if we are the governor, then the National Congress Party will be the deputy governor. If in Blue Nile, it will be the reverse. The National Congress Party will be the governor and we shall be the deputy governor. After that term is over, then you change. The deputy governor becomes the governor and the governor becomes the deputy governor. You can either do that or you choose a different person. It is up to the parties. But there should be no problem of the governor becoming deputy and the deputy becoming governor. It will be very sobering. It would be a good experience. So that's the second aspect of the Nuba Mountains and Southern Blue Nile Agreement. The third point about this agreement is that the Western Kordofan state shall be abolished. That's why I said before that one state would be lost in the process. And so Al-Kordofan Al-Gadim, Kordofan province bita Ingilizi Zaman, instead of being divided into 3 states, will now be divided into 2 states. Northern Kordofan and another state which we have called in the document here Nuba Mountains stroke Southern Kordofan state. That for the members of the Nuba community who might be here, or people in general from Southern Kordofan, this compound name is because we could not agree on the name. The government delegation wants to call it Southern Kordofan, and our delegation wanted to call it Nuba Mountains State. And so we did not want this to the Carabal agreement. We say let us give the naming of the child to the parents. Kuluzol besama jana bito. And so we have agreed that before we sign the final comprehensive peace agreement, which will be sometimes in July or August, I'll come to that. We will bring committees from both the SPLM and the National Congress Party from the area to sit down and agree on what to call the state. That solves our problem. Rather than the pressure being on me or on Ustaz Ali Osman, we have given it back to the people to go and decide what they call themselves. And so the Western Kordofan state will be abolished. Why is this? It is not against anybody. And it is by agreement. This is because Western Kordofan state at the present time is composed of 3 entities. It is composed of the Nuba in Lagawa. Lagawa is in Western Kordofan state, and it was part of the Nuba Mountains. Abiy and Darmiseria. Now Abiy, according to the agreement I will present to you now, Abiy will be administered from the presidency. And if we take Lagawa to the Nuba Mountains, Western Kordofan state will be left only as the Miseria. And that may not be a viable state. And so we consulted. We consulted with the Nuba, and we consulted with the Miseria whether they would be in one state. And they agreed that they have no problem, they can be in one state. And so Western Kordofan state cancels, and we have 2 states instead of 3 states in the old Kordofan. And so instead of having 26 states, we'll have 25 states, 15 in the north and 10 in the south. The fifth point I want to point out in the agreement on the two areas is that the people of the two areas had asked for the right of self-determination. And in the conferences of Kauda and Deir Mansour, the SPLM was specifically mandated to negotiate the right of self-determination for the two areas. We have reached an alternative formulation for this concept and have not used the Native Assembly of the Nuba Mountains and of Southern Blue Nile are the ones that will pass the verdict instead of a plebiscite or a referendum that involves all the people. It will be the elected representatives in Parliament. The relevant passage reads as follows, in terms of popular consultation, because it is a new concept, and I'll read you the relevant passage. Popular consultation is a democratic right and a mechanism to ascertain the views of the people of Southern Kordofan, Nuba Mountains, and Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile states on the comprehensive agreement reached by the government of Sudan and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement. This comprehensive agreement shall be subjected to the will of the people of the two states through their respective democratically elected legislatures. And this will be done in the fourth year, the Senate Rabba with an interim period. The sixth point I want to underline in the agreement on two areas is that the agreement specifies a share in the national wealth, including transfers from the central government, according to guidelines set by the Fiscal Allocation and Monitoring Commission, plus transfers from the National Reconstruction and Development Fund. In addition to this, oil-producing states are entitled to 2% of oil produced in that state, as is specified in the Wealth Sharing Agreement. So in the case of the new state of Southern Kordofan stroke Nuba Mountains, it will get 2% of oil produced in the state, since oil is produced both in the Nuba Mountains and in Western Kordofan. They will also get 2% of the oil produced in Abyei. I will come to that in the agreement on Abyei. And they will also get 2%, because 2% is to Western Kordofan state, which gets abolished and becomes part of Southern Kordofan or Nuba Mountains state. They will also get 2% from the oil of Abyei, which is given to the Miseria people, which will become part of the Nuba Mountains state. So they will get 4% with our oil with Abyei, with 2% with our oil with home. These are sources of revenue for the state, because it is meaningless to give to a region or to a state autonomy bidun gurush. And so lazim yakun fi a component with our wealth that goes to these autonomous states. The seventh point, which is important, is the issue of land. One of the major causes of the war in the two areas, in the Nuba Mountains and in the Funch areas, is the problem of land. Fi mahalad land nyakamu. And this problem will be solved through a land commission. Each state will have a land commission, which is agreed in the protocol. The land commission shall be composed of people from the state, and it shall exercise all the powers of the National Land Commission at the state level. The relevant words are that it shall review existing land leases and contracts and examine the criterion for the present land allocations and recommend to the state authority the introduction of such necessary changes, including restitution of land rights or compensation. So, Mashkila Bita land, which is a burning issue in the Nuba Mountains and in southern Blue Nile, will be addressed through the Land Commission. Finally, in the two areas, can be Mashkila for security arrangements. In the security arrangements, Yomdak, we agreed that there will be integrated units in the Nuba Mountains and in southern Blue Nile. 3,000 for the SPLA, with 3,000 for the government army, making 6,000. For Jubal, for southern Blue Nile. There is a clause also in the security arrangements agreement which requires that excess forces beyond 3,000 Vital SPLA will be withdrawn south of the 1/1/1956 borderline. Lakin the security arrangements agreement is silent on what to do with the excess government troops that are excess of 3,000. And this caused a lot of confusion and murmuring في جبال النوبة وفي Nil al-Azraq, that why should the SPLM withdraw its excess forces south of the 1/156 line, while Hakuma does not withdraw its excess forces. We believe this is not a problem because actually 6,000 is a big number of troops to deploy in the Nuba Mountains. Before the war, there was only one battalion for Jubal and Nuba, about 700 men. Now we are talking about 6,000. So there is no reason why there should be more than 6,000 troops in the Nuba Mountains. Similarly for southern Blue Nile, Mama Frudokun aktar min 6,000 askari fi Nil al-Azraq. But the government had a reasonable argument, because they were saying that if it is written into the agreement that al-Hakuma hayinsahib Guwatu, its forces from the Nuba Mountains, forces that are in excess of 3,000 from the Nuba Mountains and from southern Blue Nile, this will be a precedent. It will be an example. It will show to the others, and it may be copied by people in eastern Sudan. For example, the BJ are fighting in eastern Sudan. In Darfur there is war. So when we go to solve the problem in eastern Sudan and we go and solve the problem in Darfur, Nas Darfur command bigul عاوزين integrated units 50% 50%. وباقي الجيش بتاع الحكومة يفوت. ناس بتاع شرق السودان حيقول نفس الشيء. فده بخلق مشكلة. We were silent on what to do with the excess government forces. But our understanding was that these forces will not go beyond 3,000. But then Mafi Damana. This is the argument with our comrades from the Nuba Mountains and southern Blue Nile. So we have solved this problem in this Nuba Mountains and southern Blue Nile 2 areas agreement. We have said that the troop levels in the Nuba Mountains and in southern Blue Nile will be determined by the presidency. And anything for Sita Elsda will be determined by the presidency. And in the presidency, Hayakun fi National Congress Party or SPLM. It will be a collegiate presidency. فنحن بكون موجودين هناك. The relevant passage about this is that it says that without prejudice to the agreement on the security arrangements and the right of the Sudan Armed Forces, Jaysh al-Hakuma, to deploy forces all over northern Sudan as it deems fit. Government troop levels in southern Sudan, government troop levels in southern Kordofan, Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile during the interim period shall be determined by the presidency. So I believe for those from the Nuba Mountains and southern Blue Nile that this concern, this concern has been adequately addressed in this protocol. Finally, on the schedules, the 4 schedules, Schedule A is on exclusive and executive and legislative powers of the two areas. Schedule B is on concurrent powers. Schedule C is on residual powers. And Schedule D is on state revenue or sources of state revenues. So that is the summary of the agreement on the two areas of the Nuba Mountains and Southern Blue Nile. Garabna Nakhelis, for those of you who are impatient. The third agreement is the protocol on ABA. This was a very contentious issue. This is the agreement on ABA. It is 9 pages, and it is signed by Commander Deng Akuei. It begins with a preamble. There's 11 paragraphs. The main features of the ABA agreement are the following. And so you can see that the power sharing is 63 pages plus some pages with 2 areas, 20 pages, so that is 83 pages plus 9 pages with ABA. The agreements we signed are a total of 92 pages. The main features of the agreement of ABA are that ABA is defined as, quote, the areas of the 9 Ngok Dinka chiefdoms that were transferred to Kordofan in 1905. So we have defined what ABA means. ABA are the areas of the 9 Ngok Dinka chiefdoms. There are 9 sections, the Ngok Dinka, that were transferred to Kordofan in 1905. So we have to go back and see where these sections were living in 1905. 2, the Miseria and other nomadic peoples retain their right to graze cattle and move across the territory of ABA. And Miseria andum huguk bitapasha man beji ashan bagar bitom yakul wa yashrab moya. Number 3, upon signing of the peace agreement, ABA area shall be accorded a special administrative status under the institution of the presidency, in which A, residents of ABA will be citizens of both Western Kordofan, now Southern Kordofan or Nuba Mountains Estate, and of Bahr al-Ghazal, with representation in the legislatures of both states. And so, Nazabia Hayakun members in the legislature of Southern Kordofan State, and the next state, Hayakun Mujawar Law. I don't know which state, one of the states in Bahr al-Ghazal. 2, ABA will be administered by a local executive council, elected by the residents of ABA. Pending elections, the executive council, its initial membership will be appointed by the presidency. And then 3, net oil revenues from ABA will be divided 6 ways during the interim period. The oil katir tahid ABA, and that was a difficult issue. That almost destroyed the negotiations, but it was solved. فالأويل في أبيع هيقسموا له 6 أقسام. 50% will go to the national government. 42% will go to the government of Southern Sudan. 2% will go to Bahr al-Ghazal. 2% will go to Western Kordofan State. 2% will go to the Ngok Dinka. And 2% will go to the Misriya people. Gasamna fi the sita entities or sita nas. For kulu zoland uswaya bito. And so I figure kulu nas hayakun mabsutin. In addition, the national government will provide ABA with assistance to improve the lives of the people of ABA, including urbanization and development projects in the area. Finally, international monitors will be deployed to Abyei area to ensure full implementation of these agreements. The Ajak Hayamulu under the presidency, and we will ensure that they are implemented. Number 4, under Abyei, is determination of the geographical boundaries of Abyei, because Mamaruf a line with Abyei Wen. So they shall be established by the presidency an Abyei Boundaries Commission, or ABC, to define and demarcate the area of the 9 Ngok Dinka chiefdoms transferred to Kordofan in 1905, and which shall finish its work within the first 2 years of the interim period, upon which the presidency shall take necessary action to put the special administrative status of Abyei into effect. Finally, the security arrangements for Abyei, because they are not covered in the security arrangements agreement. The main points in the security arrangements of Abyei are the following 3. Without prejudice to the agreement on security arrangements, the 2 parties, the SPLM and the National Congress, through the interim period, shall form and deploy 1 joint battalion in the area. سيكون في كتيبة مشتركة مختلطة في أبيي مكون من الجانبين. 2. International monitors, as shall be agreed in the comprehensive ceasefire agreement, shall also be deployed in the area throughout the interim period. And 3. International monitors shall be deployed to Abyei to ensure full implementation of these agreements. So, the referendum of Abyei, that's an important point. I have actually skipped it in my notes. Upon the referendum of Abyei shall be simultaneous with the referendum in the south. And the choices in the referendum will be whether Abyei remains in the north retaining its special administrative status or reverts back to Bahr Ghazal. These will be the 2 choices. And that referendum will be done simultaneously the same day with the referendum between Junub. As you can see, I have tried to summarize 92 pages. That's not easy, and that would tire us all. So I have come to the end of the summary of the 3 protocols that we signed 4 days ago. You will, however, get the full information from the documents, and so I have encouraged all fronts and regions and counties and commissions and chapters abroad and interested individuals to get the copies of the 3 documents so that they read for themselves. With the above 3 protocols, we have now signed a total of 6 protocols, namely the Machakos Protocol of July 2004, the Security Arrangements Agreement of September 2004,